Right, good evening everybody, welcome. My name's Tim Cross. I've been asked to oversee the evening and it's a great pleasure to do so. And a warm welcome to you all. Thank you for, I know some of you have travelled quite long distances to be here. There we go, somebody's phone's going. I'm ex-military, and when the phone goes when it shouldn't, it's around a port for everybody in the mess. So you can buy a drink afterwards. So yeah, I've been asked to oversee the evening, which I'm obviously very happy to do. Now this issue of abortion is clearly an issue that's very much in the news and quite emotional and quite, you know, I've just come back from America where people don't have conversations about this issue in America anymore, they just throw brickbats at each other. And that's not what this evening is about. It's about opening up a conversation and having a debate and looking at the issue from both perspectives. And there's been a lot of stuff in the press recently, as you will know, both with the imprisonment and release of Carla Forster for the death of her child Lily Foster. But also more recently, I was listening on Radio 4 just the other day about the issue of miscarriages and the number of miscarriages that are happening and so forth, and people not being looked after properly when they've had that. So it's a good time to be wading into the debate, but as I say, it's obviously very sensitive. And there are a couple of ladies here tonight with lanyards on. You can you show yourselves? So if anybody gets upset or is worried or wants to talk about any of the issues, there's another one, 3 of us, then please don't hesitate to have a chat afterwards. And they will, you know, help you talk it through in a very non-judgmental way, I should add. Okay, so what I want to just do is set the scene of where we are now, where we've come from, and then I'm going to ask Anne to speak, and then Christian. They will have about 12 minutes each. They will then respond to what they've heard for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. And we aim to end at about 8:30. We've obviously started a little bit late, so we'll see how the evening goes. So there's obviously been quite a revolution in this issue over the last 40 years. And I was looking at this earlier on, and whether or not all doctors actually subscribe to the old Hippocratic Oath, you may remember the Hippocratic Oath from the 5th century BC, it's always assumed that they subscribe to its main undertaking. And in the context of today's world, it's quite interesting what that said. I will follow the method of treatment that they subscribe in the main undertaking. I will follow the method of treatment which, according to my ability and judgment, I consider for the benefit of my patients, and abstain from whatever is deleterious and mischievous. I will give no deadly drug to anyone if asked, assisted suicide, ? Nor suggest any such counsel. And in like manner, I will not give to a woman a pessary to procure abortion. So that was the Hippocratic Oath back to the 5th century BC. And that's the way it was for around 2,500 years, until in 1948 the Declaration of Geneva updated that oath, and it included the promise, I will maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of conception. That was the UN declaration. And any abortion was illegal in the UK, in Britain, until 1929, when the Infant Life Preservation Act said that no action would be punishable when an abortion was, and I quote, done in good faith with the intention of saving the life of the mother. This changed in 1967 when David Steele's Act was passed. Anybody else in the room around when David Steele Act was passed? I remember the debate well, actually. On the face of it, it was a cautious extension of that 1929 Act. Medical practitioners were required to form, in good faith, an opinion that the continuation of the pregnancy would either risk the mother's life, risk injury to her or her existing children's physical or mental health, greater than if the pregnancy were terminated, or allow a substantial risk that if the child were born, it would suffer from such physical or mental abnormalities as to be seriously handicapped. Back in 1967, at that time, the number of abortions carried out annually in England and Wales by the NHS was around 6,100. But most importantly, or very importantly, at the same time, low thousands of women were dying in so-called backstreet abortions, and that became very much a part of that debate as to how we could stop that happening. One of the key arguments in David Steele's Act. In 1968, the year after the passage of the 67 bill, those statistics rose to about 24,000. The numbers reached 167,000 by 1973, about 6 years later, and by 2008, over 200,000 a year. And the latest statistics for January to June last year were 123,219. So over the year, about 250,000 we're running at today. Those figures don't include the morning after pill, which induces an early abortion, or the reception of these the pills that are sent through the post, which was part of the issue over the Carla Forster case. So that's where we've come from, it's where we are today. And today is to have a conversation and a discussion about how do we feel about that, where do we stand on both sides of the debate and the argument, and then see where that takes us. So to our two speakers, Anne is the former Chief Executive Officer of BPAS, the UK's largest abortion provider. She's the author of 2 books, The Moral Case for Abortion, and its follow-up, A Defence of Reproductive Choice. A staunch and clear advocate for abortion and women's rights, she's written articles in The Times, The New Statesman, The Guardian, The Telegraph and Spiked Online. She's also appeared frequently on national media, including the BBC, ITV and Sky. And Anne is married to Frank, a world-renowned sociologist and political scientist.
He's married to me.
He's married to you. You're married to each other.
We're married to each other.
Christian is an anti-abortion campaigner and has worked for the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK, CBR UK, for the last 7 years. He's written widely on the subject of abortion and has been published in The Critic, Premier Christianity, Christianity Today and The Heart newspaper. He's also appeared on BBC Radio 4, LBC and BBC Three Counties. And Christian is married with 3 children and lives in Kent. So we have 12 minutes to kick off. Anne, you'd like to go first, and then we'll move on to Christian.
Thank you very much, and really thank you for inviting me to be part of this discussion, and to you for turning out. We had absolutely no idea how many people would want to be part of this discussion, and this is really an amazingly good audience, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was saying that we had 5 people signed up on Friday, so we've done quite well.
We were discussing the fact we could have like kind of intimate, informal discussion. So to say thanks. Secondly, just to give you a point of reassurance, because I know sometimes people get a bit uncomfortable, the hair thing, I'm not having treatment, it's nothing worse than alopecia. And I say that because sometimes people tend to assume one of 2 things. Either they assume that I'm in treatment to something life-threatening and so feel a need to be easy on me, so you don't have to be easy on me. Or they think I'm making some statement about gender, which is possibly even more annoying. But so yeah, it's just alopecia. Abortion as healthcare or abortion as a moral issue. I think, Jay, you set up really quite clearly how much things have changed over the last 40 years since abortion has become legal. And I think the way that it is seen in society has really changed. I think that for the majority of people, possibly not the majority of people in this room, but the majority of people perhaps see abortion as something that is a difficult issue. They may see it as being something that is wrong, over there, kind of wrong. But they feel that when they or a young woman is pregnant and she doesn't want to be, that abortion is a sensible and the right thing to do in those particular circumstances. And I would go so far as to say that I think these days there are people who talk about abortion being very stigmatized still. As someone who's worked in abortion for nearly 25 years over pretty much my entire adult career, I think abortion is stigmatized less now than it has been at any time. And I would probably argue that probably having a child on your own unsupported, and particularly an unplanned pregnancy, is probably more stigmatized than having abortion. I think most young people at university these days know someone who's terminated a pregnancy, and I think, and I'm just stating something empirically as I see it, It's up to us to decide whether it's right or wrong, and this is what I really want to go on to talk about. I think that very often people today see it as an extension to contraception, and that's why the numbers are so high. We have a very high expectation that we should be able to control our lives, that it is good and it is right for us to plan our families and to have children at times when we think it's right and we think that we can give them the love and support that they will need to grow up. And I would go so far as to say that, well, we know at BPAS half of the women that we see have children already. And in fact, talking to women, I used to spend a lot of time in the waiting rooms when I'd go to clinics and talk to women about why they made the decision that they had and all of that. And very often the reason why they are there is because they feel that they can't support another child with their existing family. And often women will say, actually, I would kind of, under different circumstances, I would have this baby. You know, they think about it as a baby that could be born. Under different circumstances, I would have this child, but. And then there's a huge range. And there might be things that organisations think that you might be able to fix, like I haven't got decent housing, or I haven't got enough money, and so on. And there are charities that will work to provide that support. But often the but is a really big but. It's, but I'm only 16, but my partner definitely does not want to have this child, but I've already got a very young child that I need to be looking after. So what I'm saying is the circumstances in which women make their decisions are contingent, they're contextual, they're based on their lives. And we will often see women who are, again, they think abortion is a bad thing, they think it's a wrong thing, but they feel that they need to go through this this particular time. And I think that we have come to see, because we value control over our lives and because we value children very, very highly, and we value our family lives, we've gone through a stage where, you know, there's the kind of contraception that you have before you are thinking about having sex, then there's the kind of contraception that you use at the point of sex, and then there's the morning after pill, and just to correct slightly, the morning after pill which works up to a certain point, but not after a pregnancy is implanted, so you can't cause an abortion by taking it. And then there's the abortion pill, which you do need to comply with the law and two doctors need to agree. But as you quite rightly said, you can now get pills sent to you through the post. And I think it's changed things quite a lot. And there are some women who will now say, well, I'm not going to be on the pill anymore. The pill used to mess me about, really used to play, you know, all kinds of problems with my hormones. So maybe I'll now use the condom. I know that it's less effective than the pill, but if it comes to it and I do get pregnant, I can use these pills. And taken in early pregnancy, and this is a matter of fact, you know, it is a safe way to do what women have done for centuries, which is effectively bring on your period. Now, I'm not saying that that makes it right or that makes it wrong. What I'm saying is that abortion now exists as something that can be done safely and relatively easily and accessibly by women, and it's funded as part of the health service because public health regards it as being better that we decide when we want to have children, and it's assumed that that is generally the way that we look at it. So in terms of abortion as healthcare, abortion is seen as being part of reproductive health. It's being seen as part of a way of birth control, and it is now safe and funded by the National Health Service. Late abortions, a different issue entirely. Later abortions are definitely not seen as an extension of birth control at all. There's something that happens when a woman is in often very extreme and very emotionally troubled circumstances. You only have to imagine for 2 minutes what it's like to be deliberately ending the life that you have felt moving inside of you, to know how seriously a woman would take that decision. However, abortion in the general world, I do think, has been stripped of a certain moral content. And in my writing, it's one of the things that I've really tried to inject back into it. Because I don't think that you can say that, even though I'm saying that I do think that abortion belongs in reproductive health care, and I would go so far as to say that I think that, I would prefer us to go back to the days of talking about birth control rather than separating abortion and contraception, and be honest about what's going on here. We are controlling whether or not a woman is going to give birth to a child. I do think it is a fundamentally moral issue. And there are those of you who think that ending a human life, and I accept that the embryo, the fetus, is a human life. It's clearly living. It's not dead. It's clearly living. It's clearly human. I mean, it's not a gerbil or a rabbit. It's clearly human. It's clearly going to be a baby, and as it grows in the womb, it will look more and more like that. Let's not play about with words and do sophistics and semantics and so on. Let's accept exactly what we're talking about here. But the thing is how we view it in the whole scheme of things, and whether or not we think that there are circumstances where it's okay, whether it's acceptable for a woman to decide that she's not going to continue with that particular pregnancy. Now, a writer who I've got a huge amount of respect for, but I think he might actually be involved with your organisation, an evangelical writer called Francis Beckwith, I think sums up what makes it wrong from the point of view of many people who think it's wrong, where he says that if the unborn is not a human person, then there's no justification necessary for abortion. But if the unborn is a human person, no justification is adequate. Well, that's one way of looking at it, and I think that's a straightforward, an easy way of looking at it. And, I won't argue that abortion involves killing, stops the beating heart, it ends the life of a living thing. And I give the embryo immense value because it does have the potential to become one of us. But to me, its potential to become one of us is not the same as already being one of us. And that, to me, really matters. And when I say that, for me, abortion is a deeply moral thing, this may make some of you feel uncomfortable, but I really genuinely believe it. I feel as strongly that women should have the moral right to decide whether they continue a pregnancy as some of you will feel that they should not have the moral right to continue a pregnancy. For me, there are two basic principles that are absolutely essential to our humanity. One is the notion of our bodily integrity, that no one can use our bodies for a purpose. No one can use our bodies without our consent. We are ends within ourselves. And I think that's incredibly important, because the principle that we have to give ourselves up for the benefit of somebody else actually sets a horrendous precedent. I mean, what stops Christian, for example, being seen as a collection of body parts if you deconstructed Christian and you used his eyes and his lungs and his heart and his liver, you could perhaps save the lives of 4 or 5 or more different people. Why do we not allow that to happen? Why do we not sacrifice people? We do not sacrifice people because we accept that their bodily integrity is their own. You can say that if I was the only person who could save my son, who I love dearly, by giving him a bone marrow transplant, you could say that I would be the most appallingly immoral person in the world if I didn't agree to that, and I think you'd be right. But you couldn't force me to give that bone marrow transplant by law, and I think that's right. I think we have to allow people to make decisions for themselves. And the other thing that I think, the second thing that is a fundamental moral principle that we must uphold, is our personal freedom to work out what is right and proper for ourselves, to act in accordance with our conscience. So when a woman comes for an abortion and she says, it is right for me to end this pregnancy because it would be wrong for me to have a baby at this time because of what it would deny my existing children. I've weighed this up, I've thought about all of the circumstances, and I think what I am doing is right. Then I think you have to allow her to do that. She's not talking about killing a person that knows it's alive. She's not talking about killing a person that has been born. She's talking about killing a potential person that is still within her. So what I'm saying is that, in conclusion, the status of the fetus may be up for debate, right? And we may disagree about it. But the status of the woman should never be up for debate. A woman should never be stripped of the rights that she has because she's pregnant. And she has the right to decide what is to do with her own body, whether she's pregnant or whether she's not. And she has the right to make the moral judgment which is going to affect her more profoundly than it will affect anyone else, because she will look in the mirror every day of her life and know that she made that decision. You and I might think it's right or wrong, but we can always walk away from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I really do owe it to you, Anne, because everyone else on Twitter was there was an embargo on debating me tonight. So Anne really did help. Like, she saved the day in one way by agreeing to debate with me. Thank you for using me as an analogy.
Sorry
you're
about
welcome
that.
to sell my body parts, but good luck trying to shift my legs. That's all I'm saying. Now my speech, we did make an agreement that we're going to do set speeches first round. Okay, so I'm not going to respond to lots of what Anne said. We're going to have to wait for round 2 for that to do. So I'm going to just jump straight in here. And let me begin by clarifying what healthcare is. Healthcare is, according to DuckDuckGo, the prevention, treatment and management of illnesses and the preservation of mental and physical well-being. And tonight I'm going to argue that abortion falls light years outside of this definition, and I have 3 points. Point number 1, because every successful abortion kills a human being. View the NHS website and it will tell you that an abortion is a procedure to end the pregnancy. That is about as misleading as saying the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is a disagreement between old friends. Okay, at the heart of every abortion procedure, as Anne concedes, is a beating heart that is intentionally stopped. Abortion does not terminate a pregnancy as if it's a legal contract. They intentionally target and kill the baby that is causing the pregnancy, using chemicals, sharp instruments, or a powerful suction device. Second trimester abortions literally decapitate, dismember, and disembowel the child before they are tugged out through the cervix, one body part at a time. Anne is under no illusion here. To quote from Anne's book, ending the life in the womb is exactly the point. She's also described second trimester abortions as grim.
and most importantly agrees with 95% of biologists who think that unborn babies are human beings from conception. In an interview with Premier Christian Radio in 2019, she stated, "I too believe that from the time an egg is fertilized that a human life is there, and that unique life is wonderful and marvelous. But the point for me is really about who makes the decision about how that life is valued in relation to other things." So we've heard from Anne. Unlike so many of her former colleagues in the abortion industry, she agrees that they are human beings. However, as this quote also shows, it's the core of her argument is that while an unborn baby is a human being, Anne believes it should be the mother that decides whether that baby is valuable or not. Because, as elaborated on elsewhere in her writings, a baby person is not the same as a mother, right? Because it's maybe not self-aware or not aware of itself, etc. Now, I think this is wrong for two reasons, and I'm going to take you up on the offer, and I'm not going to be light on you at all here. But if you feel like I'm shooting at you, please know that I'm actually trying to shoot at the ideology that I think has you in its grip. And I don't think this is good at all. And firstly, this is because whilst it sounds lovely to say, let mothers choose what's right for them, all Anne is doing here is building a nice-looking feminist structure on some of the most degrading, wicked, and catastrophic ideologies of the last 2 centuries. When you allow one human being to value or to define the value of another human being, you do not get freedom. You get the transatlantic slave trade, you get segregation, you get apartheid, you get the killing fields of Cambodia, you get the Holocaust, and you get abortion. You name it, no society, past or present, is without its examples, but they all flow from an ideology that allows one human being to decide the value of another. Now, please don't hear me wrong. I am not calling you a Nazi or a slave trader. I'm simply saying that whether you realize it or not, you are repackaging a godless philosophy that is resulting in hundreds of thousands of babies fearfully and wonderfully made, being suffocated, expelled, and flushed down the toilet like feces each year. This is not healthcare. This is, to quote Philip Reeve, a death work that needs to be repented of. As Christians, we believe that God and God alone accredits value to human beings from conception, regardless of how small, how developed or dependent they may be. The fact that it is inside its mother changes its location, but does not change its moral significance. The fact that a baby is not self-aware is no more a reason to kill them than it is to kill a person under anaesthetic or in deep sleep. And therefore, so-called medical procedures that dehumanize, harm and kill those that God deems precious are not medical procedures at all, but crimes against humanity. Secondly, I believe Anne's argument is wrong because it's misleading. See, Anne makes herself out to be an individual moral advocate for abortion, but during her time at BPAS, she did not simply facilitate women's choice. She led an aggressive campaign of expansion by combating the notion that abortion should be rare and championing the idea that abortion should be a moral good. She saw abortion rates increase, repeat abortion rates increase, DIY abortion introduced, company profits increased, and prayer and protest criminalised outside multiple clinics. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter, warns God in Isaiah. From a corporate perspective, Anne was incredibly successful. From a moral perspective, her leadership oversaw the killing of around 1 million human lives over the 19 years that she was in charge at BPAS. If my first argument is correct, future generations will not remember this as healthcare, they will remember this as genocide. Now, Anne, you have read and debated some of the best pro-life apologists in the world. I don't presume to win you round to this point tonight. However, in love, I do need to warn you that one day, you, like all of us, will have to answer to God for those 1 million lives he made but BPAS killed. On that great and dreadful day, there is only one person who has the expertise to represent you, and his name is Jesus. But not only can he represent you? But he really wants to, Anne. He really wants to represent you. And he doesn't want you to suffer the punishment that your career has created. Point 2. Abortion is not healthcare because it causes harm. As read, according to the Hippocratic Oath, the oldest and most widely known treatise on medical ethics, abortion is expressly forbidden. It says, I will give no sort of medicine to any pregnant woman with a view to destroy the child. Modern iterations of the oath are summarised up in 3 words: do no harm. But on both accounts, abortion contradicts this. It kills the baby, something that was historically forbidden not just by the Hippocratic Oath but by British law dating right back to the 16th century. But I'll go further in stating that abortion contradicts this because it actively harms women. Uncontested, immediate risks of abortion include sepsis, uterine perforation, cervical laceration, and inflammation. While the UK abortion industry tentatively concedes that abortion leads to increased risk of future preterm delivery, the BPAS information packet flatly denies an increase of future infertility, placenta previa, endometriosis, and future ectopic pregnancies. They also utterly deny the link between abortion and breast cancer. And if that's a controversial link, I've got a long list of, I think it's 76 meta-analysis studies from worldwide that I think 62 of which show that there is a link there, and I'm very happy to debate that in round 2. Finally, the abortion industry deliberately downplay the known links between abortion and poor mental health outcomes. As recently as 2018, the British Journal of Psychiatry found that women who had undergone an abortion experienced an 81% increase in mental health problems. Lucy Burns managed to win a Sunday Times Book of the Year award describing her mental breakdown following her abortion procedure. Yet, no one, not Lucy who wrote that book, wants to put 2 and 2 together in fear that they will be handing back hard-fought rights to have sex with whoever, whenever. Mounting evidence suggests that abortion is doing far more harm than good. And one thing I'd really like to hear from Anne tonight, given these allegations exist, is why not settle the matter? NHS numbers are the best medical identifiers we have for tracking health consequences over a lifetime. They allow researchers to study the impact of certain drugs and procedures without contravening patient privacy. Yet still to this day, even with the novel introduction of DIY home abortion, NHS numbers are still not being routinely collected by the abortion provider. Surely there's an option to collect them, but they're not always collected in a mandatory capacity. Surely, if what I'm saying is a blazing lie, longitudinal data would prove it to be so. But the fact that the abortion industry seems so reluctant to do this, to me, raises serious suspicion. If the tobacco industry suppressed evidence for decades when their product was being accused of causing harm, is it possible that the abortion industry is doing the same? So, to summarise so far, abortion is not healthcare because it kills the baby. Abortion is not healthcare because it actively harms women. Finally, abortion is not healthcare because it's not caring. Since 2020, the abortion industry have been pushing for double pills by post-abortion at home. When they did this, they knew, or they should have known, that there's a failure rate of around 5%. That means, for whatever reason, the baby doesn't die, or it's not fully expelled in the medical abortion procedure. If they were unsure, they could have asked the drug companies themselves, who put the failure rate at around 6 to 7%. Yet the abortion industry have utterly ignored this. According to FOI data, between 2019 and 2023, under conservative estimates, 29,000 women have suffered complications and needed medical intervention at their local hospital. This includes 250 women a month who require further surgical procedures to remove what is left of the baby or placenta. Can you imagine that? You've had a medical abortion at home, you've been bleeding out at home for days, and then you contact the abortion industry helpline, they send you to an A&E, where effectively you have to have another abortion procedure, this time a surgical one. I wonder how many pro-abortion activists would come to the rallies if they knew if they knew how much they were being systematically let down by measures the abortion industry brought in, claiming were in their best interest. And then, when it comes to the sticky question of cost, an FOI request to Wrexham Hospital found that the abortion industry charges £421 in total for a medical abortion procedure by post. Not bad for an hour-long chat down the phone, a short email exchange, and a trip to the post office. Scale this up and you realise the abortion industry's exploitation of COVID has made them obscene amounts of money. Over £101 million last year. And that's not taking into account the cost of the NHS for when these procedures go wrong and they have to sort it out.
Last 2 minutes.
How ironic that measures brought in at a time we were being told to stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives have done the total opposite. In conclusion, healthcare is about improving health, treating illness and actually caring for people. Abortion cannot be said to be healthcare under those categories. On a near inconceivable scale, they are facilitating the killing of hundreds of thousands of babies a year, raising the risk of mental and physical harm to mothers, and finally abdicating their duty of care by posting pills out blindly into homes with all the consequences that that entails. No society that is serious about healthcare should tolerate such an industry anymore.
Looking over my wire here. Yeah, it's difficult really to know where to start. So, what I can just say is that my silence on some of the facts that have been presented does not equate agreement with them. There are only a few that I can really take up. I think one of the things that I think is endemic and runs through the argument that you put is that you don't really accept that women are in a position to take responsibility for the circumstances that they're in. And for you, it is very much a sense of women being conned, trivial medical conditions and so on being trivialized. And I think you really got that wrong. I think particularly when it comes to early medical abortion, I don't know where you've got the idea about the way that it's presented to women being so different from the way that it actually is. Because what you would actually find is that abortion providers will bend over backwards to talk to people about the possible complications that arise out of procedures, and particularly the fact that with early medical abortion, there is a failure rate to it. And the reason why an abortion provider would want to do that is because you don't want women to go off and suffer and think that something is happening if it isn't. If something is not going according to plan, you want them to absolutely be able to seek help for that as soon as possible. So if I was talking to a young woman about early medical abortion, I would be making it absolutely clear to her, you take these tablets, this is what's supposed to happen. If this doesn't happen, it may not have worked. In about 5 women in every 100, they may need to see a doctor and they may need to have another procedure. You can choose. Is that something that you want to accept, or do you want to go straight for another procedure or not have one? Why would we want to con women into doing this? And the reason why I think this is particularly important is because, I really believe very strongly in the importance of conscience. I really believe in the importance of acting in good faith. And when it comes to a problem pregnancy, I believe very strongly that the woman who is at the centre of that situation needs to take responsibility for what is going to be the future of that particular pregnancy. For me, it's not about being pro-abortion or against abortion. It's simply a question of who decides. Now, you may think that it's evil of me to be facilitating, okay, you think it's evil of me. You may think it's evil of me to be facilitating the decision of a woman to end that pregnancy. But I think it is incredibly presumptuous to deny a woman who genuinely believes that she is doing the right thing, who doesn't hold your particular views about the nature of the unborn child, to put herself in that position. And, you know, we see women who are Catholics, who are Jews, who are Syrian, who are of no faith whatsoever, and yet they feel that they will be able to justify their positions before their gods because they feel that they are acting in the interests of their families and their communities, and sometimes themselves, but sometimes not. And I think it is incredibly distant and inhuman to just see this as being a principle that you can that you can rule on from on high. You talk about the idea of women being able to have sex whenever, whoever they particularly want to, as though the clients who are coming to BPAS, young wanton women, when if you look at the statistics, which are gathered to a greater extent than any other medical procedure, you'll see that most of the women who are having abortions are married women, or they're women who are in permanent relationships. They are not young women. They are women in their late 20s and early 30s. So what I'm saying is that at the end of this, somebody makes the decision. It's either going to be you that makes the decision, or it's going to be the woman herself who will live with the consequences of it. I think when a woman comes into BPAS, and around 15% of women who come into BPAS leave and decide after counselling that they will continue the pregnancy, I'm delighted by that. I have a huge presumption in favour of life. I battled against infertility for 7 years before having a surprise pregnancy of my own that has been probably the most delightful and greatest achievement I've had in my life. And yet, much as I wanted my child, I can completely understand and empathise with women who are not in that situation. So what I would say is, you know, that phrase, trust women, it's not like it's a mad feminist slogan. It's simply saying one person is, I would say, look at themselves in the mirror every day. You would say, ultimately stand before God and justify their actions. Let them make that decision. I do not feel I have human suffering on my conscience. If I have to justify, last sentence, if I have to justify what I have done throughout the entire of my career, I will say I have let women in desperate and difficult circumstances make a decision to do what they feel in good conscience is right. And we'll see where that leaves me in the future.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. When put under pressure, it's so easy just to return to the euphemisms, but ultimately your final statement there was that when you stand before God, you said, words to the effect of, you know, you helped women in that moment make the decision that is right for them. That's not how God's going to see it. God's going to see it that in that desperately hard and tricky circumstance that I wish upon no one, and of course I can exercise all my faculties to empathise, but I still may not get there. You are saying in that circumstance, I am going to facilitate the killing of that innocent unborn baby to help make things better for you. Now, your ability to feel the moral weight of that right now really is inconsequential compared to the fact that one day when we all stand before God, we will all feel very differently about many decisions we made in our lives. Listen, I think the abortion industry is conning women through a very nature of what it is doing and how it is operating and the very premise it is set upon, which is it makes money out of the intentional killing of innocent human beings. And even though within of it you have principled people, and you are a principled person and an integral person in some regards, I would argue, it's no doubt that within of the system and the 500 abortions every single working day, that once the system is set up, no matter how principled the top person is, if the top person is presenting abortion as something that is ultimately a moral good, as that percolates its way down to Sally or Karen or Genevieve or Philip or whoever the administrators are who are actually prescribing the drugs that are going to suffocate and kill the child at the home, you're going to end up with a very different situation. And this is why I'm delighted you took us up on the offer of this debate, because ultimately I think you are head of an industry that benefited financially from, in that moment of duress, helping those women to kill their own children. And whilst I don't doubt in the initial moments there may have been some relief, although many witnesses say that in the waiting recovery room, the ladies are always crying, that the long-term moral consequences for that on those women is far worse than if we had created a system that actually supports them and helps them in that moment. And honestly, Anne, I've got huge hope for you, right? Which is I can imagine a day where we can actually work together on creating solutions to complex human problems that don't involve killing an unborn baby that God has fearfully and wonderfully made. I believe that. I genuinely believe that. And
I'm touched by that. Yeah.
I'm not saying that lightly.
I believe you that you mean that.
Sure.
And I thank you for that.
But I just don't want you, I don't want you to appear before the judgment seat like, some kind of member of history who thought they were doing a really good job by dealing with the vermin, which it turns out in the end was actually a human being. Not that you think unborn babies are vermin. Do you see?
Definitely not.
No, yeah. Not that you do that. But the point being is that this all comes down to the moral status of the unborn baby. And it all depends on whether it is okay in that moment of duress to let the mother be the moral decider of whether it's a human being or not. And to me, I think that is like adding, hypercharged voltage that only God should possess into an already complex and horrendous situation. And I do believe that society would be far better if we protected all life wherever we found it, no matter how tricky the circumstances we find them in, from conception to natural death.
Amen.
In finishing, you said that you have a proclivity towards life. And I believe you on that. And I'm delighted what you say about your son and how that's one of the most meaningful things you've ever done. Right? And I also heard at one point that you if a wasp is in your kitchen, you sometimes usher them out with a newspaper.
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt, right? But this is the contradiction that I don't fully understand in you, Anne. Is how can you take a newspaper and usher a wasp out a window and yet find yourself for 19 years facilitating the killing of 1 million UK babies? That to me is a disconnect that needs to be addressed. Because unless you think a wasp is more morally significant than these unborn babies, which sometimes you say are significant, other times you say, well, it's the mother's choice, then I really, that there seems to be, what if you showed the same compassion and protection of unborn babies with your newspaper for all of those babies that you did that wasp in your kitchen that time, or multiple wasps over the course of your lifetime?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, I'd love to. Take the phone. Can she have an extra minute or two?
Yeah, go on then.
No, well, you see, the thing is I think that you hit a really good point, because we can't just think about life in the abstract. For me, I have an enormous presumption in favour of life. But I do think that sometimes we make decisions that may end a particular kind of life for a greater benefit. So for me, I will usher the wasp out as long as the wasp is not going to be causing harm to another person. And I think that when a woman is making a decision about abortion, it is because she has weighed that the embryo, the fetus, continuing the pregnancy is going to be a cause of harm. And I think that's why she makes the decision. There's a whole discussion that I have here in this sort of sense of what it means when you say, can I kill it? And I think it depends entirely on the circumstances and entirely contingent on what it is and on the circumstances that you're in. And much as I respect the life of the embryo or the fetus, I respect the woman's life more.
Okay, and thank you. And you've made that point a couple of times, and thank you. I need to stop.
No, fine.
So a couple of things, questions, which I think it would be interesting for both of you to answer.
Sorry,
you made a great play, both of you, on, or you have, Christian, huge profits, etc. So one of the questions is, how can abortion organisations like BPAS be truly neutral when counselling pregnant women when there are huge profits involved? And a follow-on from me is, therefore, would it be better if this was all done within the NHS and there were no private providers making money out of this? So, Annie, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that anyone is profiting out of this is just incorrect. I mean,
can I ask what is correct?
Well, what would be correct is if you looked at BPAS's accounts for last year, you would see that it was in fact in deficit for £3.5 million. Nobody is making a profit out of it. In fact, it was my job when I was there to make sure that we operated to a balanced budget, and I was responsible to my trustees to in fact make sure that surpluses were not generated, because it's a not-for-profit organisation. And I would actually say that it's the existence of the not-for-profit sector that has prevented the rise of private clinics, because nobody could charge the prices that were necessary. You'll actually find that when you quote those figures of £400 per procedure, there is an equivalence across the National Health Service hospitals and BPAS clinics and MSI as well, because there's a kind of standard fee, if you like, for the procedure. But nobody in this country is making money out of abortion services. And I think that that's actually a really good thing. I think it would be horrendous if people were. We should not be making money out of suffering.
Okay, Christian?
I just want to ask a heap of questions off the back of that.
Yeah, go on.
So
hang on a second, I don't want you to dominate going on. We've got people out here who want to ask questions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so as far as I can see, if you go onto the Charity House, Charity Commission website, right, and you look up BPAS, in 2022 they received £39.5 million in government grants.
No.
Or in income, and the line...
Sorry, can you hear at the back, okay? Okay, good. Yeah.
So if you go onto, I was saying, if you go onto the Charity Commission website or whatever it is, and it gives you a kind of list of income over the last 5 years, right? And you can see that the income has kind of, for BPAS, has kind of gone up to last year, which was £29 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me it seems obvious that whether that money is being allocated or spent well, people at the top are on a 5-figure salary, and clearly the NHS, we know, is being paid per abortion pill that it posts out, and the NHS is being charged when that 5% conservative figure of women go in to require more hospital treatment as a result.
So would it be better for the NHS to be doing this internally and not allowing private providers? Well,
my mum worked for the NHS for 53 years as an anaesthetist, and she, there was all kinds of problems in NHS wards with abortion and staff and nurses kicking off about it. So I think one of the easiest things to do was to give it to the private sector in order to kind of smooth that, to smooth out those kind of ethical qualms. The issue being is that when you give it to the private sector, the not-for-profit is a tax status. It's not a business strategy. And from all pretense and purposes, looking from the outside in, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like the abortion industry has grossly expanded. Abortion figures went up by 17% last year. So, which means that whoever is expanding the category for whatever reason, more people are having more abortions, and those abortions are being taxed to the clinical commissioning group. So I don't know how you guys are spending the money, but from the outside looking in, it looks like a lot of money is going in, and it's definitely an industry.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Change the subject slightly, and you've touched on it. Question: many women carry guilt and shame for years because of what they have done. How can the abortion industry ignore that, Anne, and do you accept that? There was a programme on television recently where there was a doctor who said there was no post-abortion trauma, there was no such thing as post-abortion trauma. Do you agree with that, and what do you think about this idea that women carry shame and guilt for years after they've had an abortion?
I think some women do feel guilty. Women can be shamed. I think shame is what we feel from what other people do with us. But what I honestly think is that it's never a woman's ambition to have an abortion. I think women always feel that abortion is a failure in some way. They feel if it's an unwanted pregnancy, they often feel that they failed because they didn't prevent the pregnancy. If other reasons, they feel that they've failed to be able to be in a situation where they could become a mother. But I think that what you just have to think about is the alternative. And is a woman going to be better off if you tell her that she can't have the abortion and she has to have the child? Because I think that the evidence generally is that when women cannot attain an abortion through a legal health service, they find ways to do it themselves. I've got answers for why the numbers of abortions have gone up, which I think are an interesting thing as an aside, but perhaps I can come back on that while we sum up.
But sorry, just to be clear, nonetheless of what you said, there are certainly issues for women having had abortions where they do carry post-trauma and so forth. Absolutely. In exactly the same way, the women. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about postnatal depression, but nobody says that we should therefore prevent women from having babies because of postnatal depression. Yes, I think some women do suffer, other women don't after an abortion. But the point is, should you prevent them from taking that action? Just to add to that, though, there's the danger of going too deep into this, but the idea that no woman has an abortion, willingly, in inverted commas, wants it. There are a number of so-called celebrities who often say things that play into the atmosphere. So there's a lady who writes for the Times on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Who's publicly said that she took longer to think about the colour of her kitchen cupboards than she did about having an abortion. And that's not an unusual comment from quite a lot of the celebrity world. Do you think that's right, or do you think she's just trying to be clever or something? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I have to say, one of the most uncomfortable discussions that I had was I was actually having my nails done by a young girl, and we got talking about what job I did, and I just sort of mentioned that I was involved in contraception, and said, I don't get on with that. She said, well, she'd just been telling me that she'd moved in to live with her boyfriend at his grand's house, and I said, what will you do if you get pregnant? And she sort of shrugged and said, get rid, I suppose. Now, to me, that made me do that kind of intake because, as I've said, I think the beginning of life is unique and wonderful. And I deeply hope that people who say this, when they actually come to look at it, I think that typically women do have a sense that when they look at a positive pregnancy test, the decision between becoming a mother and not, I think, is enormously laden. But I don't, we can't say what flippant people think about life. We can wish that they took it more seriously, perhaps.
Okay. Next question. In the debate, there's no mention of the man's rights.
Yes.
Where do the views and rights of fathers fit into this equation? Do they have a say? Do you want to go first?
Yes, I think men have been entirely excluded from this debate. Anyone who's had been to a kind of, I think it's like the 12-week midwifery meeting, there's a moment where the man gets ushered out the room so that they can have a private chat with the lady, just in case, she wants to choose something that the man doesn't want. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say, it's, people often say to me, that it's the man, the man doesn't carry the baby. They're correct. Let's not argue about biological facts. The man doesn't go through all the hormone flushes that go on, and all the discomfort and other things that are involved in a pregnancy. The man doesn't have the delight of feeling a baby kick inside his belly, although if he has too many beers and a lot of curry, he does feel things moving, but not in a good way. But at the same time, when people say, nothing, I had to do kind of trips to random corner shops in the middle of the night to try to meet my wife's cravings. I listened to her when she was suffering in her pregnancy or when she just had a really bad day. Her experience was not just her experience, it was our experience. And this is a kind of goes back to this, the linking with sexual ethics, because actually if you're not in committed relationships with men, then not only is it more likely you can get pregnant and they will walk off because the sexual revolution only freed up one half of the sexes, but secondly, if you're not in that committed relationship, then you're not going to receive that support. So in answer to your question, I think if men are committed to ladies, and if they are supporting them and helping them through their pregnancy, then I really think abortion figures would fall dramatically. I still think abortion needs to be abolished legally, because I think that will also help to decrease numbers dramatically. But I think actually for men to, if men are playing a crucial role, then they should be part of the discussion from start to finish. If men are not interested and they're just making women pregnant and then they're just walking away, no strings attached, then I think we should. I think that should probably be some kind of crime, because it's leading to abortion, and I'd happily put them in, and they can sweep up the leaves outside the oak tree in my house, because they produce a lot of oak trees. The point being, if men are involved, and if men are committed and committed to life for their partners, then they should absolutely be involved in the decision. And if men are not committed, well, I'd hope to work towards a world where they weren't even having that conversation in the first place, because it hadn't got that far down the line. But these are radical sexual ethics that we may need to pick up later.
And how are men involved in your experience when women are coming to the clinics, getting advice and so forth? Are they usually with their
yes, and increasingly people come as couples. I mean, that is generally the case. I remember a particular time when I first started working in this area, people would tend to come on their own, or a girl would come with her mum. And then they got to a certain point where we realised that we had to change the magazines in the waiting room, because it generally tended to be much more couples. And I think that generally it is a joint decision. There is always a moment in the consultation where a woman is seen on her own, and that's because precisely to avoid any clinical problems, you have to make sure that you've got an accurate medical history, and there may be things that a woman or a girl wants to say that she doesn't want to say in front of a man about stuff that's happened to her before, so she needs to have that private moment. But I think that ultimately, given that it is a medical procedure on a woman, we do have to say that a man should not be able to override that, because otherwise, if you were allowing men to stop abortions and have a right in that way, then presumably you're suggesting that they all should have the right to compel a woman to have an abortion. And I think that is as abhorrent, possibly even more so, than preventing it, if that makes sense.
Next one. Do you agree with the current UK law that allows the abortion of babies with Down syndrome until birth? If so, why should they? Do you agree with that law? I mean, I think we probably know what your answer is, Christian. So, do you want to go first?
Me first. No, I think the killing of any human being is wrong and should be banned in law. If a child has a disability, then we should be adding additional supports to help them. We shouldn't be killing them in the womb. And the fact that around 900 babies a year now are being killed because they have Down syndrome in the womb, I think, is perhaps the greatest clash between this disabled inclusivity agenda and abortion rights. And the way Channel 4 decided to resolve that is by getting two disabled people to showing them kind of very biased facts on abortion and then getting them to kind of agree that abortion is okay for disabled people. That to me was abhorrent television, and we need to disabled people need to be protected, and if they can't live long outside the womb, they need to die dignified deaths, not intentionally fast forwarded. Often with the use of a drug named potassium chloride, which is the same drug used on death row to kill inmates in America, and has been described by those who've had it in much more dilute solutions as being excruciatingly painful, like liquid fire. So I think the whole treatment of disabled people, once it finally hits the public domain, is going to cause a real din, because it's totally barbaric.
Okay,
I don't think there should be any difference in the law in the way that it relates to fetuses with detected abnormalities and those without. I think it's interesting with late abortion that the situation that you have with where an abnormality has been detected, or where you've got a disabled fetus, if you want to, or disabled baby, if you want to put it like that, is that two doctors have to certify that it would be that the abortion's at the woman's request, and that there's serious risk of serious abnormality. I would actually really prefer that there was not a law. I would prefer that late abortions were a matter for two doctors to certify on grounds that when a woman has requested an abortion, that they feel comfortable with also. I think that would get rid of the issues around possible discrimination and so on. And I think that it would just be so much more sensible for doctors to make decisions with their patients than for some politician to again make some decision without knowing anything about the circumstances. So I would like effectively to have the law as it relates to fetal anomaly just extended. And I tell you, I do not think that there would be any more abortions without that law than there are with it.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Okay. So a baby with Down syndrome, right? Currently diagnosed maybe 17, 18 weeks. They decide that they don't want to keep the baby, so it's injected either directly into the heart or into the umbilical cord with potassium chloride. You know what potassium chloride is?
Yeah, when I started work at BPAS, I felt if I was going to talk about the work that our doctors were doing, I should spend time. I thought it would be wrong for me to not spend time in theatre with them talking about what they were doing. And yes, I've seen these procedures take place. I've had to describe these procedures, and it's very straightforward that when you have an abortion that is generally over 18 weeks, you will have an injection into the fetal heart of potassium chloride, which ends the life of the fetus.
If you manage to hit first time.
Oh, well, you have to make moot point. There are different medical practices in other countries and so on, but they do it under an ultrasound and are trained, and the idea of that is to make sure that the heart stops instantly, and then the doctor is able to, as you say, he then dissects and brings out the fetus in parts.
For a lady who ushers a wasp out the kitchen with a newspaper, is there not a little part of you, as a Down syndrome baby is injected with a lethal injection and then pulled apart, that goes, that's wrong?
Yeah, look, of course it is absolutely terrible. And as you say, well, maybe you didn't say, you're talking about a Down syndrome baby. I'm talking about any baby,
could be anarchic,
any pregnancy
yeah.
in these situations. But I tell you what I found really interesting when I spent this day in theatre. There is not a doctor in that theatre who has not read the case notes and who doesn't know exactly why it was that the woman was there, the girl was there having that procedure. And it's really interesting because I knew it was going to be a really haunting day. But I tell you, actually, the experience that haunted me the most, and that was a young 15-year-old girl who was really, really scared of going into theatre because she'd never had an anaesthetic before, and she was really worried that she might not wake up. And if she didn't wake up out of the general anaesthetic, no one would know how to look after her pony properly. And she made me promise to hold her hand the whole time and to remember what she told me about her pony. Now, that was how immature and young that girl was, and that is actually what sticks with me from that day, was the awfulness of that young girl being 23 weeks pregnant and how her life would be. And talking to the doctors, they see that they are doing something good for the women. That's how they live with it, because they don't feel themselves bad. They think that they're doing a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Isn't pills by post really a form of backstreet abortion?
Well, it kind of depends what you mean when you're saying backstreet abortion, because although strangely enough, I think there is a strong similarity in the sense that this is women taking drugs to induce a pregnancy in the privacy of their own home, where they can choose the circumstances and who they're with and exactly when they take them. The difference between the days of backstreet abortion is that these are drugs that are safe. Now, I know you're going to leap in a minute and tell me how many women have died as a result of taking these, and we're talking small numbers and so on. But then when we talk about the number of abortions that take place, and you were saying more than 200,000, nearly 220,000, 250,000 women a year, of which probably about 180,000 of those are now using these pills. And the number of adverse events, or certainly the number of really severe incidents, is minute. So you're talking about a large number of women having these and using them at home, but without any unwanted effects. There may be unwanted effects for you, but they're certainly not unwanted effects for the woman.
Okay. Yeah, I think backstreet abortion, I think DIY abortion has been a return to the backstreet. I think it marks not only a massive betrayal of women. Carla Forster simply would not have been able to kill Lily Foster had she been invited into a clinic and had an ultrasound scan. She wouldn't have been able to abuse the system, and of course people are going to abuse the system because me and you, and we know what human nature is like, and that's why medical systems need to be set up to sieve through and to protect and safeguard against human beings that tend to lie. I mean, I know two women who've had DIY abortions and who've given their story. They've been through healing programs on it. One of them, called Natalia, ended up umming and ahhing for days before she took her pill. She ended up taking it beyond 10 weeks. There was a lot of blood. The baby was very human when she finally passed it. It said she ruined her. She spent 3 days lying on her mattress by herself in her bedroom, and then she spent the rest of the year not living in her own home because of the memories that produced, which means I think this DIY abortion stuff is not only harming women, but it's changing the very concept of what it means, what a home is. Okay?
It's interesting.
Kirsty from Birmingham stated this, and I've said this quote so many times, I memorized it. She said, "My home used to be my happy, safe place. Now it's the place that took the life of my child." Right? So these measures are so blind, and they are so reckless, and they are changing the very concept of people's homes. Because actually, when Kirsty left a little bit of blood on her carpet because it was the last reminder that she had of her baby. And so I think anyone, and this is why I'm very serious about telling you to repent of this stuff and to come and start redeeming yourself in the respect that these measures have caused colossal harm. You say vanishingly, you say it's a small number of people. 26,000 women is not a small number. That's not one or two, right? Carla Forster was one of 4 women in the first year of DIY abortion who took these pills beyond 24 weeks. You know this because the CQC and the police were calling you. So I think we've got. What I would love us to. I mean, I'm not going to settle for working together on abortions. I think you need to come all the way, and you need to start protecting babies in their homes, inside their mothers, inside their houses. And that 15-year-old the other day, why were you holding her hand while some clinician killed her baby? You should have called the police, found out why she got pregnant, had that man arrested, and she should be put into a safe house so that she delivered that child. And that child, whilst probably it may not have been suited for her, could have been, and I know you talk about not being naive here, could eventually, through trauma, because adoption is trauma, have ended up in a happy home. But that trauma is a lot better than the trauma of taking innocent life. And this is something I think you've got to repent on, because I'm deep down inside you, Anne, I know that there's a part of you that still loves life.
Okay, last question. Can you just, either of you, comment on the pain threshold of the unborn? Because one of the debates and conversations we hear is that they don't feel pain, that we don't need to give them painkillers, etc., etc., etc. So if you could just finish with that question. Anne, do you want to go first?
I honestly think that, we have to honestly say there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot that we don't know. There are certain things that we do know about the way the body works and the way that nerves and so on join up and allow sort of feelings to take place. There's then another huge world about how we then process our experiences that we only begin to come as we begin to grow up. I honestly think, I really think that in some ways what we should say on this, and the approach that abortion providers should have, is that they work on the basis of being cautious and to make sure that if an abortion is taking place, there is the minimal possibility of any perception of suffering, but then you kind of can't win in the discussion, because ultimately, Christian, it's not a matter of, this sounds harsh, but ultimately, you don't think abortion should happen at all, whether the fetus can feel pain or it can't feel pain.
Agreed.
So in some ways, it's a bit of a phony discussion. I think what I would say is that if it is going to take place, let's make sure that nobody suffers as a result of it. And the reason why, just going back to my 15-year-old pony owner and so on, really, should that young girl have had to go through the rest of her pregnancy and give birth? Do you think that would not have affected her for the rest of her life? These are judgment calls, and maybe the parents with a young girl are in a better position, and the doctors, to decide on that than you and me are pining on it, really.
Yeah, okay. I did hear a comment from John White, who talked about this a lot, and he made the comment that some, I don't know how many, but some ladies say, I could, when they're asked to have the baby and let it be adopted, I could never allow my baby to be adopted, which is what you're touching on in a way. How do you encourage people to have the baby?
I think it's a difficult thing, because I think there are many women who feel, and I can understand this, I think there are many women who feel they could end a pregnancy early, they couldn't end a pregnancy later, and they definitely couldn't give birth to a baby and give it away. And people feel that about embryos. I worked for a while for the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, and there comes to a point where you could only store your embryos for so long in the freezer, and then couples have to make a decision about whether or not they're going to continue to freeze them, they want them disposed of, or they want to give them for research or donation to a couple who are trying to have a child. And it's very interesting, the number of couples who, they don't feel that they can allow their embryos to be used in treatment for somebody else.
Can I respond to the pain?
Yes, do please.
The pain question, you're correct. I think all abortions are wrong. I'm not going to use the pain as some kind of vehicle for pushing a greater agenda. I do think we need to talk about the facts, right? When you have an ultrasound, the baby's moving around. When you stick a needle in and around, when you have an abortion procedure using a suction device, the baby's responding to that device. It's trying to get away from it before it dies. Maybe you've seen a few of those. Yeah. So you just said yes to that, correct?
Well, it's arguable that it's an instinctive. It doesn't mean it's feeling anything. It's like plants move.
It's responding to its environment. It's responding to an intruder, right? We then have operations that happen inside the womb for spina bifida in utero. They use painkillers for those. We also know that when babies are born early at 22 weeks, they wince and stuff when they have their cannulas in, when they need to be supported, right? So anecdotal evidence is suggesting very heavily that they're experiencing something. Stuart Derbyshire, who was one of the people who wrote for the ARCOG report in...
Very good mate of mine. Yeah. I was at his wedding.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, hopefully one day I can be at his, well, not his second wedding, I wouldn't approve of that, but at some event of his.
Actually, he has just had a second wedding, but it was the first one that I was at.
But the point being, he was part of the ARCOG discussion in 2010 that put pain at 24 weeks, which just so happens to coincide with the abortion limit in the UK for healthy babies. Okay, they've now done another review under pressure because of all of this information I just gave you about the spina bifida, and the ARCOG have now released more data to suggest, well, maybe it actually is even higher than 28 weeks, which coincidentally also aligns with the abortion push to decriminalise abortion up till birth. I think it's obvious that unborn babies feel pain. It's obvious that in the public's eye, that if it was proven that they would feel pain, people would feel less comfortable about abortion. And I think it's another example of the abortion industry manipulating the science to meet their ends. And on the scientific question, we haven't talked about the breast cancer stuff, but I do have scientific papers at the back that I encourage people to take it, and I encourage you to take, to look, to see whether you think
I know the data.
To see whether the abortion industry is thinking that they're ideologically blinded, they know what they want, and they just wrap everything around that, as opposed to thinking it's a baby, abortion kills it, abortion harms women, and abortion with these DIY abortion blind measures is certainly not caring for women because of the huge numbers of complication rates that you know about, and yet the abortion is failing to act on.
Okay, thank you. Now there are two tables through the other room, and there is literature from both Anne and from Christian. Please do feel free to take. And I want to just say thank you again for coming, but thank you in particular to Anne and Christian for being prepared to stand up